Amber Alert Podcast.
Welcome back. This is Amber Alert Podcast episode. No. I was going to say episode 2. We're way past episode 2. Episode 111, part 2. I am your host, Amber Starkey. It's a great day to be alive. It's a beautiful day here in Ohio. Not too hot. It's like 73 degrees. It's sunny, which I actually kind of hate the sun. But it feels not deathly hot outside. Okay. Anyway, like I said, we're going to start off talking about Project Pegasus. Baja Blast is so good. Anyway, Project Pegasus, I'll tell you what it is. I'm going to read about it. And there was a video that I thought about including, but I think it would just take too long. And it's faster for me to give you the breakdown of what this is supposedly about. Now, I want to say this up front. I don't know for sure if this is a real thing or not. I lean toward, I think it was a real program. Where I get suspicious is whether or not it was actually successful, because that's where I don't put it past people to try this. Absolutely don't put it past people. In fact, what it is, Project Pegasus was supposedly about time travel. Okay. And I know that sounds insane, but serious scientists admit that they believe it's theoretically possible. Mathematically, scientifically, they believe it's possible. Where it gets kind of muddy is, has anyone actually been able to do it successfully? Now, I personally don't believe that it has been successfully done unless somebody has dabbled in the occult. If you get into the occult, then I believe you can do it. And the Bible has shown us that not necessarily time travel, but like teleportation, if you want to call it that, happened in the Bible. So it's obviously not impossible, but in those cases, there was obviously supernatural involvement where it was actually the Spirit of God picking a person up and putting them somewhere else. And that's impossible, like physically. So clearly when the supernatural is involved, there's this bending or breaking the rules of time, matter, energy, all of that, right? Like breaking the laws of physics as we understand them on this earth. So I think if there's supernatural involvement, I would not doubt that something like this could happen, but that's the problem. If you go after it and try to do it, you're going to have to dabble in the occult. And obviously that's bad news. That's how you get demon possessed and end up in hell eventually. So you don't want to be doing that. Now, I don't put it past, I would, yes, easily believe that the government tried to do this, maybe is still trying. I just don't necessarily believe that they've done it successfully, again, unless there was some type of witchcraft involved. So that's what Project Pegasus is about. Not about witchcraft. I mean, I would consider it witchcraft, but they, on paper, probably didn't mean that. A lot of people, I think, have gotten into science, and science itself is not a bad thing. God made it, right? The God of the Bible is the author of all of the science that we understand. But the problem is people will pursue science to a certain point that it then turns into the occult. Science will only take you so far, and then to go beyond it is to get into the occult. Basically what they're doing at CERN in Switzerland, they've talked about, they're not even like trying to hide it. We've opened like gateways or portals, and entities have come through that we've talked to, and they're otherworldly. They're not of this world, right? They're not of the earth. And so that's what happens when you push science so far, is you will get into the occult. And I think that's what happens when you run into stuff like this. If it is about breaking the laws of nature, something supernatural is involved. And if it's not the Spirit of God who's behind it, who has initiated it, but it's initiated by people or by another entity that's not of God, that's evil and fallen, that's bad news. So this is not something I think people should ever in a million years attempt to do. But has our government attempted to? That's what Project Pegasus is about. So let's read, and you can make up your own mind whether you think this actually happened or not. Okay? So Why is my screen like this? Hold on a second. I can't read with it being okay. So, Project Pegasus is described by its proponents as a secret U.S. defense program allegedly active mainly in the late 1960s through the early 1970s. The central public figure connected to it is Andrew. It's either Basiago or Basiago. I'm going to go with Basiago. According to the claims, the project involved teleportation, time travel, chronovision, or viewing past and future events, either or, and advanced space-time technology supposedly derived from suppressed physics research. Okay. So notice the foundation for this is science, is physics, right? So there's nothing wrong with science. There's nothing wrong with wanting to understand it better and even have breakthroughs. Lots of good things have come from that, and all of which, again, was made by God. He made the laws of this world, how the earth works. He positioned us in relation to the sun so that the exact degree we're at, life could exist on this planet. All of this is God's idea, right? So that's not a bad thing, seeking to understand that better. But as soon as you decide to play God or push past a certain point, you literally will end up crossing, I think, from the natural realm to the spirit realm. And if you're not if you're not submitted to the God of the Bible and everything you do is in the name of Jesus, it's familiar spirits, it's wrong spirits. And that's exactly what happens when people get into meditation, astral projection, remote viewing, the whole ashram thing, Eastern mysticism, all of that. That's the occult, and it's people who pushed past the natural limitations of the laws of the earth, the laws of physics, and they end up demon possessed, and they talk to entities, and the entities, they're liars. They can tell you anything they want. We're from the Pleiades, we're from Zeta Reticuli, or what, they can tell you whatever they want. They're liars. And if you are engaging with entities that are otherworldly because you've gotten into meditation, remote viewing, astral projection, whatever it is, those are like demonic spirits, fallen angels. Like, run, get out and run. That's bad news. So that's essentially what, again, this is like based on science, but this is where it leads. So next, why is it doing this? I can't read with it like that. Can we, gosh, this is so small. All right. Supporters often associate it with DARPA, which is like a defense program. I forget what it stands for. Covert military or intelligence programs, and ideas linked to Nikola Tesla. So the core claims are teleportation or jump rooms. Basiago claims the program used teleportation chambers, sometimes called jump rooms, teleportation chambers, or Tesla teleporters. And the alleged mechanism involved creating a controlled distortion in perspective. Now, this sounds like a sci-fi movie. I understand that. Actually, there's a movie called Jumper, and it came out early 2000s, maybe, because it had Hayden Christensen in it, who basically did Star Wars and then kind of fell off the face of the earth. He was in that movie, and it was about him and one other guy, Jamie Bell, who's British. He voices Tintin, but that's beside the point. And they were supposedly jumpers, so they could jump like from one they could teleport essentially. And I believe, if I remember, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, I think there was some time travel involved, but they definitely could jump from one place to another, but they had to be in a certain place, a jump room type of thing. So you got to wonder where the inspiration for the movie came from. But this is the type of stuff you see in sci-fi movies that everybody just dismisses as just that, sci-fi. It's fictitious. This is just somebody with an active imagination came up with a script that would be interesting, then they made a movie out of it. Actually, Back to the Future, I was listening to a video on Project Pegasus, and one of the things that supposedly was said to these jumpers, which we'll get into according to what Basiago and some others said, that if you're time traveling, you need to make sure that you don't run into another version of yourself that'll like cause a problem, which is exactly what happened in, I think, the second movie, Back Back to the Future 2, whenever he warned him, like, don't run into, if you run into yourself, you got to run, basically get away from. So again, that's a movie, that's sci-fi. And again, I'm not saying that I believe everything that was claimed about Project Pegasus happened, because I don't necessarily, but I find it interesting that this supposedly existed before these movies came out, which makes you wonder where the inspiration for the movies came from. And there's way more than just those two. Next. All right. So he describes two brackets or devices generating an energy field, a shimmering portal or tunnel, and instantaneous transport between locations, commonly alleged destinations, New Jersey to New Mexico, underground facilities, and military bases. Some later narratives extended this to Mars-related claims, though those are even more disputed. Yeah. So again, to save time and not play the whole, like, there are plenty of videos I could play on this subject, but part of what was claimed was not just teleporting from one location to another or time traveling back in time, but some people, including Basiago, claimed that they jumped to Mars, right? And they even allege that a young Barack Obama was involved in the program, and they actually called them chrononauts or chrononauts. So like an astronaut, but not an astronaut. And we'll get into why chrono is in there. So there are some wild claims here. Again, I'm not saying I believe them all. I think something probably happened, and I would not put it past people to try this. It's just another way of playing God, like we read in part 1 about Vladimir Putin with some of the, let's have 3D printed organs, and let's let the anti-aging type of, let's reach for eternal life without going through the Almighty, the God of the Bible, right? And so there is this playing God aspect that a lot of people have gotten into. So this would be another way. Okay, God made the rules of the universe. How do we get outside them and start to make our own way? So that's why I don't put it past them to believe that this may have been a real program. Next, chronovision, or viewing the past and future. So a major part of the Pegasus story is not just physical transport, but chronovision. This allegedly allowed observers to witness historical events, view possible futures, and observe distant locations through space-time. Basiago claims he saw future events, he witnessed scenes from U.S. history, and was sent to observe moments involving Abraham Lincoln. There's more on that. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay, so supporters sometimes compare the idea to remote viewing, which again is an occult technique, quantum observation concepts, holographic universe theory. Holographic universe theories. The print is so small from where I'm sitting, I can't read it very well. Or nonlinear time models. Okay, so that's what they're comparing it to, which again, remote viewing is definitely a real thing. It's just an occult thing, but the government has admitted they've had programs where they've used remote viewing, and they have looked at Mars and stuff. So that's not a conspiracy theory. That's true. So number 3, children in the program. One unusual aspect of the claims is that children were allegedly used as participants. The explanation given was that children supposedly adapted better psychologically, they experienced fewer side effects, and they tolerated space-time transitions more easily. Anybody seen Stranger Things? If you've seen that show, in fact, this is not a conspiracy theory either. The Duffer Brothers were actually going to name the show Montauk because of the Montauk Project, which was a real thing. There are declassified documents now, and it basically was what the show was about. They were using kids to try to mess with their heads and get them to like have powers, like blow things up with their mind, like that type of stuff. Montauk Project. Which, if you paid attention in the last season of Stranger Things, like the very end, it's like the last episode when what's his face, David Harbour's character, Jim, I think, when he's talking to what's her name, their mom, whatever, can't remember, and he talks about taking a new job, and he'll make more money, and it's in Montauk. So they plugged it there at the very end of the show. So it was a real program, the CIA admitted, and they used kids because they found kids easier to use than adults for whatever reason. So it's interesting that you see some similar claims when it comes to Project Pegasus. Is that a coincidence? I kind of doubt it, but that's what's said. So Basiago claims child participants later forgot or suppressed memories of the program. That's possible, but that also could be, you could say that, and then if you're making up a story, you could use that as an excuse. Well, the reason other people don't talk about it is because they just forgot or they suppressed the memory. So, I don't know. Anyway, Tesla connection. A major belief within Pegasus lore is that the technology originated from discoveries by Nikola Tesla. Gosh, I'm so annoyed I can't read this well. Okay. The theory usually claims Tesla discovered methods of manipulating space-time electromagnetic fields. Portions of his research were seized after his death, and secret programs were later developed from them. Historically, it is true that some of Tesla's papers were examined by U.S. authorities after he died. The documented fact often gets woven into the larger narrative. So it is not a theory so he died by himself in a hotel called the New Yorker. And it is true that they went in, they locked down his room, and they gathered up documents and research. That's not a conspiracy theory, that's a fact. So then the theories come in. What all was he working on that they took? And did they build on his research? Did he discover something that they harnessed, they made better? I don't know. That's where the theories come in, but they did take his research. Next. Oh my gosh, if this doesn't stop moving, I'm going to freak out. Okay. Relationship to other alleged projects. Pegasus is often grouped with the Philadelphia experiment, claims of invisibility or teleportation experiments involving a Navy ship. The Montauk project, which I just mentioned, which is mind control, time manipulation, and psychic experimentation. And the Stargate project, which is a real CIA or DoD remote viewing research. Like, again, I told you they admitted that's real. So supporters often see these as connected phases of increasingly advanced black budget research. Wouldn't surprise me because the government likes to keep secrets. The Gettysburg time traveler claim. So one famous Pegasus related claim centers on an old Gettysburg photograph. Basiago says a person visible in the crowd is him after traveling back in time, wearing relatively modern-looking clothing. Skeptics argue the clothing is consistent with the era, and the image interpretation is subjective. So this, because one of the most widely circulated parts of the story, it became one of the most widely circulated parts of the story. I will show you the picture in a second. I'll actually show it to you now, okay? Which is right here. Now, what Basiago is saying is the boy who's kind of right in the middle of the picture standing by himself. So a lot of people said that doesn't look like anything. That's just a kid. He's wearing clothing that matches what everybody else is wearing. And then what some people point out is the shoes are way too big, which is what he said. He was wearing shoes way too big. They said his haircut isn't right for the 1800s or whenever, and stuff like that. So I don't personally find the picture like convincing. I don't want to call Basiago a liar, but I don't really see the picture as like concrete proof. Oh yeah, that's him and it must have happened. Because what he said was that he traveled to Gettysburg multiple times. So it is true that his father was like part of the project, and so was he. That's like, there is like documentation to support that they were part of something. But what he says is that he was like 6 years old when they first started using him, and they did it because they had failed with multiple adults where they sent them into, whatever they put up these, whatever kind of based off of this is the theory. I'm not telling you this is fact. This is what has been said, that based off of Tesla's research, that there were like two metal like posts or whatever. You obviously needed electricity. You'd go in between them and then people would disappear, and they would try to send them to New Mexico or Mexico or whatever. And then they would try to bring them back. The first person disappeared entirely. The second person came back aged at least 30 years and then died from what they thought was old age. This is all alleged. Another guy was physically fit in his prime in the military. Nothing wrong with him physically, able-bodied, right? And I think they said he disappeared. They sent another one, and he came back in pieces, not like someone cut him up like a serial killer, but like his legs came back first, and then the rest of him like that. So again, those are claims. I'm not saying that happened. Those are claims. So then supposedly that's why they were like, well, let's try kids. And Basiago's dad said, I have a 6-year-old son. So I don't know what parent would volunteer their child if you saw adults die. So supposedly they start using Basiago. They send him to Gettysburg when Abraham Lincoln made an address. And then they're saying that's why he shows up in that picture, and that his job was just to observe, see Lincoln, remember what he said, and then just like, make observations, come back and tell us what you saw and experienced, what you heard. So there are some sources that say he did report things that are historically accurate, that they didn't think he would have known as a 6-year-old. So that led some people to believe maybe that it actually worked and he was there. And then of course some people believe the picture. But then he said he was sent back multiple times, and that one time he ran into a younger version of himself, and he realized what he's looking at was him the first time he'd been sent back. That's what he said. Okay. And then they start using other kids and realize kids can be useful here where adults can't necessarily take it. Don't know why. That's what was said. And again, I'm not saying any of this is true. I'm giving you what's been alleged by people. Okay. Scientific themes supporters point to. People interested in Project Pegasus often cite real scientific concepts such as relativity, time behaving differently under extreme conditions, whatever that math equation is, wormholes, hypothetical, speculative shortcuts, again, more math, and then quantum non-locality, the strange behavior of entangled particles. So supporters argue these concepts suggest space-time may be more flexible than commonly assumed. So again, it's not really insane to think that this is potentially plausible scientifically, because there are serious scientists who are like, time travel may be possible scientifically. I think where I'm most skeptical is that they've actually done it successfully. And again, I don't think that you can do it unless you dabble in the occult. I don't think that you can just do math equations and bend like time and go back or go forward. That I don't believe. I know they've made a ton of movies about people making time machines. I don't buy that either. But I do, there is something in the spirit realm where this is all possible, and I will get to that before I finish. So that changes the game, in my opinion. If I didn't believe the Bible, I would quickly and easily dismiss all. I'd be like, that's nuts. But there are some things in the Bible that I'm like, well, if it happened, that changes the game. And we'll get to it before the end. Next. All right. The core claim, based on the picture, is that the blurry boy in the photo is Basiago after allegedly being sent back during Project Pegasus. Critics argue the figure is simply a normal child from the era. Motion blur from long photographic exposure, or pareidolia, which is where in your brain, you see patterns, or you see a meaning. It's like if you look at clouds and you're like, there's a bunny rabbit, and it's not. Like that's pareidolia. Or looking at a picture like, look, there's a face in the mirror, and there's not. Sometimes there might be, but a lot of times there's not. So how this connects to the Vatican chronovisor. So this is another theory. The alleged connection comes through the concept of viewing events across time, not necessarily physical teleportation. The chronovisor is another controversial story, claiming the Vatican possessed a device capable of observing past events. The main figure tied to this story is Pellegrino Ernetti. According to the legend, Ernetti allegedly worked with scientists and clergy to build a device that could tune into residual electromagnetic or psychic recordings embedded in space-time. Let me say this. I do believe the Vatican has some dirty secrets. I think they know a lot more than they let on. I wouldn't be surprised if documents, artifacts, some stuff comes out of the Vatican that will directly tie into this whole alien narrative that's coming, which will, I believe, just factor into, if not be, the coming Great Deception. And I also believe the Vatican's going to be a major player in setting up, ushering in the Antichrist. Not all Catholic people. There are Catholic people who are genuinely born again, and then there are Catholic people who are straight up evil, like the Vatican, like the Pope. There's a spectrum there. So I think the Vatican's in on some nasty occult type stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me if they have some secrets. Now, do I believe this thing exists? Not necessarily. But again, if they're dabbling in the occult and trying to manipulate time and matter and energy, that wouldn't surprise me. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I definitely don't believe all the claims concerning Pegasus or this supposed device, but I make room for it just because I don't trust them, and I believe they're definitely like into the occult. And this is something you do in the occult, is try to get outside your body, try to, astral project and stuff like that. So it's kind of all in the same neighborhood. All right. So the machine supposedly allows observers to witness ancient Rome, historical events, and even scenes from the life of Jesus. The idea resembles remote viewing, holographic universe theories, Akashic, I don't know what that is, Akashic record concepts, or non-linear time models. So again, kind of going a little bit beyond science there. Okay, next. The alleged links between Pegasus and the chronovisor. So people who connect the two theories usually believe both projects were exploring the same underlying principle, the idea that time is accessible. Instead of time being permanently lost, they propose past events still exist as information patterns. Consciousness or technology can access them, and space-time behaves more like a recorded field than a one-way flow. So this is actually, again, this is like old, these theories are old, but they're not far from what people are still working on today. Like I like Elon Musk in a lot of ways, but I also don't trust him in a lot of ways, because he's, with Neuralink and some of the stuff that he's into, they are messing with trying to access consciousness and then like reproduce it or transfer it to another person. And they can't really do that because it's not like taking an organ from one person and putting it in another. It's like an immaterial thing that's not physical, right? But they're messing with it. So this is sort of like the same thing. You're playing God essentially, and it's almost like a version of the Tower of Babel. We're gonna get to God. We're gonna go as high as we want, but we're not gonna go through Him. It's like an act of rebellion to set yourself up as God, but which is what Satan did. I'll ascend and be like the Most High God. So that's how you know the roots of all of this. It's all satanic. It's a rebellion against God. It's a perversion of what He made and how the earth operates and how we're supposed to be in relation to Him. Obviously, you can reach God through a person, and you can understand spiritual things, and you can pray in a heavenly language, and all of that. There's access there. But you're doing it through the proper channel that God Himself provided. And then on the flip side, you have people reaching for other worldly access, but they're not going through the channel God provided. And that's a counterfeit. That's the occult. That's where Satan comes into play. So that's kind of what all of this is. That's the underlying blanket to all of this, whether it's Pegasus, remote viewing, time travel, transferring consciousness, that it's like some Dr. Frankenstein meets the Tower of Babel meets science, and none of it's good. Okay, what's the last thing I read? Is this it? I may have just read this. Okay. Why people connect the Vatican specifically. So there are several reasons that this became popular. The Vatican archives and secrecy. The Vatican is associated in the public imagination with ancient texts, hidden archives, preserved historical knowledge, and scientific involvement. The church historically funded science. The Vatican has historically been connected with astrology, mathematics, calendars, and scholarship. So again, science is like not a bad thing, just as a concept, as wanting to learn and grow and understand more, but it really depends where you're coming from and how far you're going to push things. So Ernetti allegedly worked with scientists. So the chronovisor lore claims that physicists, engineers, and clergy collaborated on the project. Some versions even claim famous scientists secretly assisted. So the viewing the past idea, the chronovisor concept often assumes reality preserves information. So people compare it loosely to electromagnetic recording, holographic theory, or quantum information persistence. So again, this is sort of based on science. We think that maybe some of these things are preserved in time, and so then we can access them. That's like sort of where they're coming from. What did I read last? Okay. So hold on. Where was this? I think I skipped some stuff. Give me a second here. I did. What's this last thing I read? No. Sorry. Something shrunk my screen, and then it makes it very difficult to tell. Okay, here's where I'm at. Sorry. So the real scientific position is usually certain forms of time travel appear mathematically possible within known physics, but there's currently no experimental evidence that humans can actually do it. There's a very different statement. That's a very different statement from dismissing the subject outright. That's what I'm saying. So you can like be dismissive, like, oh, that's insane. There's no way anyone would think that. But like scientifically, it's not insane. It just is like, do you believe, yes, I think humans can do it. Or you're like, well, mathematically, they think it's possible, but they don't really know if humans can do it. So my personal opinion is I don't think humans can do it unless, again, you get into the occult. In the spirit, those rules that govern the physics of our world don't apply. And that, again, we see examples in the Bible, but also it's interesting, and I'll get to this before the end, when people are abducted by these so-called aliens, something is bending the rules of nature when those kind of encounters happen as well. So when you get into the spirit, it's like the rules of the earth, of nature, don't apply anymore, which is why I say I don't think you can do this unless you dabble in the occult. So if anyone has successfully done it, you've done witchcraft. That's where I stand on it. So how much is true? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's probably been attempted for sure, but I just don't know how much they've succeeded. Okay, next. Forward time travel is already real, so this part is not controversial at all. According to Albert Einstein's relativity, time slows down under high velocity or strong gravity. That means one observer can literally age more slowly than another. Okay. So this is experimentally verified. Atomic clocks on airplanes drift differently. GPS satellites require realistic corrections. I can't read that word. I don't know. I don't think relativistic. Astronauts age microscopically differently than people on Earth. So that's all established scientifically. That makes sense. So it's not insane like on paper, gosh, I should have numbered these. That would have helped. All right, next. All right, so in a real scientific sense, traveling into the future already happens through time dilation. The debate is mainly about traveling backward in time. So that's fair. General relativity actually allows some time travel solutions. This surprises many people. Einstein's equations contain legitimate mathematical solutions involving wormholes, rotating universes, cosmic strings, and closed time-like curves. I wonder too. So I'll be honest, I don't like the Marvel movies. In fact, I think Marvel, maybe second to Steven Spielberg, Marvel, I think, has done more predictive programming than like any other movies. Maybe whatever Steven Spielberg has been involved in seems like he's one of the biggest players when it comes to seeding the idea we're not alone in the universe and there are aliens and blah 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 blah, and they're friendly. He's like one of the big, and it sucks because he's like the best director ever. His movies are like great. But the Marvel, the whole multiverse thing, it's almost like it's giving vibes like it's the same as this, which makes me wonder who's been writing the scripts for Marvel movies. And I understand there's like they're based on comics and things like that, but it's like what influence started all of that? So many movies like contain things that like when they come out, of course that's not real, of course that's fiction, that's sci-fi, blah 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 blah. But then when you start to find out some of the real stuff the government's been involved in, and then even what serious and very intelligent scientists, based on their research, like some of this is like theoretically it's like actually possible. And then you have them making movies portraying it as, of course it's all they're sci-fi movies, right? And they're not saying we're here to convince the viewers that this stuff is real, but you're still seeding. It's like when Disney got exposed for this, with they're putting like dildos and this sexual, like the pictures in the cartoons. Why do that? Because you don't realize what you're taking in, but there's like very quick images and things that are baked into the background, and that over time it's actually desensitizing you so that when you run into the real thing, there's a familiarity, right? It's like, what's the word for it? Confirmation bias. If you like seed this little thought into someone's head, whether they know they've taken it in or not, then you like give them a lie, right? Even if you know it's a lie, and they're like, oh yeah, I've heard that before, so it must be true. That's how it works. It's like you took something in subconsciously, you didn't know you were taking it in. So then when this real scenario shows up, you're more likely to embrace it as true. And that's the whole thing with predictive programming, with like the Alien movies, or even Marvel with their multiverse and stuff like that. I wouldn't be surprised is when this full alien disclosure comes, which I think when the church gets raptured, that's when it's going to happen. Aliens will show up and they'll explain away the rapture, like they've already been doing in New Age circles. They've already said that the people that are in the way of the earth changes will be taken away, they'll be removed, because they're holding back the harmony of the earth, and humanity's got to go to the next step, and it's the Christians who won't allow them to because they're calling everything demonic. So people, if you sow this seed enough with all these movies, with the multiverse, all these ideas, then when a real something or other happens, people are like, oh, well, I'm, you're much more likely to accept it than you were if it's the first time you ever heard it. Because I've done that. Like the first time, L.A. Marzulli, when I first started listening to him, I didn't know anything about UFOs or abductions or any of it. So I was like pretty quick to be dismissive. Or even like Bigfoot stuff, which I don't think Bigfoot's real in the sense a lot of people do. I don't think it's like just some guardian of the forest, some kind of creature. I don't think it's like a real like animal. I think it's a Nephilim. There's something real going on, because not millions of people are insane and liars. But I don't think that it has a physicality to it like a squirrel does, or a wolf, or a dog. But I was quick to dismiss things because I didn't know anything about it, right? But then the more you something is put in front of you over and over and over again, then you're like, oh, well, surely there's got to be something to it, right? So that's kind of like I think Marvel's like, I don't know who they're like getting orders from, but someone behind it is very much like, I think, playing into the disclosure that's coming, which is all a deception, but it is coming. Anyway, where did I leave off? Okay, so that's based off of Albert Einstein's research. Some of this stuff is like actually definitely mathematically possible. Next. So a closed time-like curve is basically a path through space-time that loops back into the past. So physicists have seriously studied Gödel universes, that's probably a person, Tipler cylinders, traversable wormholes, Kerr black holes. Apparently, these are all named after people, and exotic space-time geometries. These are not fringe internet theories. They appear in peer-reviewed gravitational physics literature. So again, if you're ready to say that's insane, hold your horses a minute. There's actually real science backing the possibility of some of this stuff. So again, I'm not saying I believe like everything that was alleged by Basiago or this supposed program, but we definitely can't like dismiss it all like it's, oh my gosh, there's like zero chance there's anything true to it. That's simply not realistic. In fact, you're a conspiracy theory if you're going to take that position. Okay, wormholes are one of the main serious possibilities. So scientists have explored whether a wormhole could connect two distant places or two different times. The idea is if one end experiences relativistic time dilation, the two ends could become temporarily offset. This is beyond my understanding. Allowing movement into the past or future relative to the other end. Recent theoretical work still examines whether wormholes could create closed time-like curves. Okay, so there's still, obviously, there's still research happening. There is a movie, and this movie is like weird and obviously low budget, but it's called The Langoliers, and I don't know why. In fact, I think I have it on DVD. It's a weird movie. It's weird. I don't know when it came out, maybe 90s or early 2000s. Not many actors that you would recognize, maybe a couple. And it's about this plane full of people, and it supposedly flies into like a wormhole. So everyone, gosh, what happened? It's like a bunch of people, I think a bunch of people disappeared. Yeah, a bunch of people on the plane disappeared when they went into the wormhole, and only the people who were awake like made it out. So the plane, they wake up and like there's a bunch of people missing. So one of the people who was asleep happened to be a pilot. So they were, thankfully they had someone to fly the plane and land it, but they land at an airport that's like completely deserted. No one's there. And they don't know what's going on, right? They're like, people disappeared. No one's at the airport. What's going on? So the Langoliers were like these computer generated, terrible CGI like things. I don't know how to describe them. They flew. I think they had sharp teeth, and they made this sound. And so the people ended up having to run out of the airport, get back onto the plane, but they had to like fuel it up, and they barely had time to get out of there before they all got eaten by these Langoliers. And one girl on the plane was like some weird little like psychic type. I don't know what she was into, but she could like see dead people and stuff. So it's a weird movie, but I just remember that it had to do with them supposedly flying into a wormhole, and then some people disappeared, I think because they were awake, and then the only ones who made it out were asleep at the time. So I don't know who made that movie or why. It's a terrible movie. But it reminded me of that because apparently serious scientists are like, wormholes might actually be like a real thing. So, wormholes. Okay. I'm sure there's still more research to be done before anybody really comes up with a conclusion or does something with it. You know what I'm saying? Next. Some physicists think quantum mechanics may avoid paradoxes. So one of the biggest objections to time travel is paradoxes, which are whatever a grandfather paradox is, causal loops, or contradictions. So, recent papers argue quantum mechanics may naturally enforce consistency. For example, physicists like Germain Tobar and Fabio Costa explored models where paradox-free time travel could mathematically exist. Again, so you do have scientists messing with this who think there are real possibilities here, which is why it wouldn't surprise me if some of this stuff has been tried. I just sort of, I think, personally draw the line at it being successful. And plus, Basiago, who's kind of the main like whistleblower here, I think he's somewhat changed his story several times. So I'm not saying I like believe everything that he said. I just don't doubt that there was probably a real program where they at least attempted it, is all I'm saying. Okay. Some researchers are exploring retrocausality. So this is the idea that future events might influence past events. That's interesting. This has become a legitimate area of discussion in some interpretations of quantum mechanics. I'm pretty sure like the jury is out on quantum physics. We don't like know very much about it. We don't even know that things exist until we like look at them. There's some weird stuff about quantum physics that I don't think anybody really knows. Obviously God does, but like people. So recent quantum experiments involving photons and simulated time loops have renewed interest in whether information, not people, might someday move backward in time under constrained conditions. So this is still highly speculative, but it's being discussed seriously in physics circles. So again, we're not talking about anything that's like insane as far as like not at all possible. Next. Stephen Hawking's position. I personally don't care a bit what Stephen Hawking had to say about anything, but for those of you who may be fans of the late computer, Stephen Hawking took the topic seriously enough to propose the chronology protection conjecture, whatever that is. He suspected the laws of physics may ultimately prevent backward time travel from becoming physically realizable. In other words, relativity may mathematically allow it, but quantum effects may destroy any time machine before it works. Yeah, I don't personally believe time machines exist and work. I don't. That's different from saying the mathematics are nonsense. So again, don't really care about Stephen Hawking's opinion, but that's what he said. Pretty sure he also liked midgets on Epstein Island, something like that. So interesting character. The current scientific position, most serious physicists today would probably say something like, it's supported by evidence, time dilation is real, time is flexible, not absolute. Relativity permits unusual space-time structures mathematically. Relativity permits. Yeah, okay. Legitimate theoretical discussion, wormholes, closed time-like curves, retrocausality, and quantum temporal effects. Okay, so scientifically, you can make a case that it's theoretically possible. Next. Did I just read this? Yeah, that's what I just read. Sorry, my screen is, I'm not losing my eyesight. My screen is just shrinking and is getting harder to keep track of what I haven't read. Okay, that's the same thing 3 times. About to lose my temper. Won't show me the name. Wait a minute. Okay. Oh, maybe I have it in here. Whatever. Okay. Oh, okay. Now it's going to boot me out. I'm about to freak out. I can only have 10 things in here at once. So bear with me while I get back on track. Okay. That, I don't think I read this yet, bro. Let me see. Okay. So like I said, it's easy to dismiss. However, if those of you who believe the Bible, which I do, we got some examples where it looks like people got teleported. This is probably the most obvious one is Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, which is in Acts chapter 8. So Philip shows up. The Spirit of God told him to go to a certain place. He goes. There's an Ethiopian eunuch in like a chariot or whatever. And Philip hears him reading from the scroll of Isaiah. And Philip approaches the chariot and he's like, do you understand what you're reading? And the eunuch is like, no, how could I? So Philip's like, listen, I'll explain. So he gets up into the chariot. He explains to the eunuch what he's reading. And then they come to some water. And the eunuch's like, hey, why don't I just get baptized? So they stop, they baptize him. And then it says, the Spirit of the Lord caught away Philip, and the eunuch saw him no more, but Philip was found at Azotus. So the Greek wording is caught away, which is I believe the same word, harpazo, which is that's what it is in Greek. And it means to seize suddenly or snatch away, which is literally the same word used for it's in First Thessalonians, I think, where we get the word rapture from the Latin word rapturo, I think is what it is in Latin. And from the Greek, it's the same word harpazo or harpazo, and it means to snatch away, to seize suddenly. So that's where people say the word rapture is not in the Bible. Okay, neither is the word Bible. Okay, so just settle down. It comes, obviously, you should understand the Bible wasn't written in English. It also wasn't even written in Latin. It was in Greek in the New Testament. So harpazo is in there, and that's what that word means, and that's where it's used. Again, besides First Thessalonians, here in Acts chapter 8. So Philip got caught up, snatched away, and then he found himself at Azotus. And let me find where I'm at. I think this is where I'm at. So Azotus, or carry off forcefully. So Azotus was like more than 20 miles away from where the baptism occurred. So I already explained this. Sudden removal, forceful spiritual transport. Many readers see this as miraculous relocation, supernatural transport, or something resembling teleportation. Yeah, because he didn't travel normally. So that, I think, is the clearest case in the Bible that obviously teleportation is possible on this earth. However, Philip didn't initiate that. Nobody did math equations and built a time machine or had a jump room to do that. That was the Spirit of God picking him up and moving him to another physical location. So if we're going to be Bible believers, which I am, to say that this is impossible, it's not impossible. It just means there's supernatural activity involved, which is why I say if someone has actually, first of all, if you're even trying to time travel or teleport, I think you probably are dabbling in the occult, whether you really know it or not. But if anyone has successfully done it and it's not a Philip situation where the Spirit of God did it, then you probably have come into the contact of you've been in contact with demonic entities, which can probably do the same thing that the Spirit of God could do in that situation. A similar one is like Acts chapter 12, when Peter's in prison. Actually, maybe I'm going to read that, but Peter's in prison and it says an angel shows up in his prison cell. But the thing is, there were guards outside the cell and he was sitting between two guards and he had chains on his wrists. And so the angel shows up and hits him, which I think is funny. It strikes him and it's like, get up, wake up. So Peter wakes up and then it says they get out of the cell. How's that happen? By the laws of physics, how'd they get out? I don't know. You got people there guarding it, right? Somehow they're like switched off, sounds like. So then they get out of the prison, they're making their way out, and there are these big iron gates, and it says they open on their own. And Peter still doesn't know what's going on. He thinks he's seeing a vision, but then the angel leaves him. All of a sudden, the angel's gone, and he's outside the prison, and he's like, oh, dang, I guess this is real. So then he goes to the house where everyone's praying for him, and he knocks on the door, and Rhoda, the servant girl, recognized Peter's voice, and so she runs back to everyone else in the house, and she's like, Peter's at the door! And they're like, yeah, right! Which is funny, because it's literally what they were praying for was for Peter to get busted out of prison. And then here he is at the door and they don't even believe it. And she's like, I'm telling you, I heard his voice. They're like, you're out of your mind. Peter keeps knocking. So then they go to the door and they're like, oh, wow. So that happened, right? How? Sounds like the angel was able to bend space, time, matter, and energy to get Peter physically out of prison. And that may be one of the ones I was going to read, but that's not necessarily teleportation, but it's an example of the rules of nature that we live by, not necessarily applying there. So let me read the next one. So another example from the Bible, Jesus and Satan during the temptation. So in the temptation narrative, the wording also sounds unusual. So it says, then the devil taketh him up unto the holy city. That's in Matthew 4. And again, the devil taketh him up into an exceedingly high mountain. So the Greek verbs include whatever those bunch of words are, which means to take along, or receive near, or carry. So I don't know that harpazo is used there in those verses. But let's see what else. So led up, brought upward. So the text does not explain whether this was physical transportation, visionary experience, spiritual vision, or supernatural location. I tend to think it was literal and physical, where they're in one place and the devil's tempting him and that didn't work, and then they got carried. I think like supernaturally they were like Philip, teleported essentially from one physical place to another. That's my opinion. Some theologian may be able to push back and prove me wrong. That's fine. That's just where I currently am. So different traditions interpret it differently. Some believe Jesus was literally transported. That's me. Others believe it was a vision or a prophetic state or spiritual experience. I think it was literal. I think the devil actually took him up like to the high mountain and said, look at all of this. I'll give it to you if you'll bow down and worship me. I think they were physically there, but I don't think they went on a walk together. I don't think they walked 40 miles together, how far it was from one place to another. I think it was like a being caught up type of in the spirit, carried to another place like Philip. It's my opinion and I could be wrong, but until somebody proves me wrong, I stand by it. Next. So other biblical passages that people compare, Ezekiel, it repeatedly describes that he was being lifted up by the Spirit. He was carried between locations in visions and transported in spiritual experiences. Example, the Spirit lifted me up. So in the case of Ezekiel, that could be a vision where he wasn't like physically necessarily carried somewhere. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I don't know. Elijah is another one. The Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. People around Elijah seem to believe supernatural relocation was possible. I believe that was literal, because Elisha watched like him get taken up in a chariot of fire. And then, and it started off with Elisha. Remember, Elijah was like, don't come with me. And Elisha's like, I'm going with you. And he's like, I want a double portion of your spirit and all that. And like multiple times, Elijah's like, don't come with me. And Elisha's like, I'm going. So then he sees him taken up in a chariot of fire. And then Elisha walks back by himself. And, I believe, if I remember right, other people, and he took Elijah's cloak with him and stuff, and he had to, and staff, I think he had to part some water to get back. And then some people said, where's Elijah? And Elisha's like, you're not going to find him. And they're like, we want to go look for him. And he's like, don't waste your time. And they're like, no, we want to go look for him. He's like, all right. So they go look for 3 days or something. I don't remember. And they're like, we couldn't find him. And Elisha's like, yeah, didn't I tell you not to go? Because he knew he's not physically here anymore. I watched him get taken up in a chariot of fire. So I think that was not a vision. That was all literal. So clearly it's possible as we read the Bible. All right. Now, Paul. This is another example. Paul the Apostle describes being caught up to the third heaven using the same harpazo concept of sudden taking, catching up. So Paul said that's in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, I believe. And he said, I know a man who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. And he said, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. And he says that like twice, like, I don't know if I physically was taken or if it was like a vision and I wasn't physically taken, which is interesting. Now I understand this is going to sound crazy, but given who said it, if I remember correctly, I hope I remember this correctly. Pretty sure I was listening to Lester Sumrall, and he's been dead 30 years. He was like the greatest man of God. I wish I could have lived when he did. I would have gone to his church. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it was him who said, and I don't remember if he said it was him or someone else he knew. I can't remember. But something like this happened where it was either him or someone he knew had a very vivid dream one night that they were in Indonesia, or not Indonesia. I'm sorry. What's the one we went to war with? Vietnam. They were in Vietnam and they were in caves. They were in deep mud. Like it was very vivid. Like in this dream, like I'm in Vietnam and they took the gospel to the Vietnamese people. Okay. So they wake up in the morning after this super, super vivid dream and they had boots on that were caked in mud. And they were like, what the heck happened? Like in my sleep, right? And they're like, dude, like I had that dream that was super vivid, but like I didn't go to Vietnam in the middle of the night and preach the gospel. Like I don't know. So then years later, they did go to Vietnam physically in person. And when they got there, people knew them and they were like, oh, we're so happy you're back. The church is doing great. And they were like, you know me? And they're like, yeah, you brought the gospel to us. And they're like, so then they're revisiting back. Like I had this dream that was vivid. I wake up in boots that are caked in mud. I was in a cave with this mud. Like, so now I'm thinking I was physically there in Vietnam somehow, but yet I felt like it happened in a dream in one night and I woke up in my bed. So, do with that whatever you want. I know it sounds crazy, but if Lester Sumrall said it, I believe him because he was anything but a liar. So I do think stuff like that's, possible in the spirit. But if people initiate it on their own, you have to get into the occult to do it. I think if the Spirit of God wants to carry you to heaven and show you things, that's one thing, or teleport you. Like, in fact, I've told this before. I have a Saint Bernard. He's 11 now, and this was I could find the video in January of 2021. Yeah, it was like January 2nd or 3rd. So I had just moved, and anyway, so Saint Bernards, they don't listen. Anyone who's had one knows they're not obedient. They know what you said, but they don't care. They don't listen. So anyway, I was at my parents' house and they have a very long driveway and a farm. And then across the street is more farmland. It's not theirs, but there's more farm ground, and usually something like corn is planted there, maybe soybeans. But this is January, so all the crops have been harvested. So you can see that it's open. It's farmland. It's open everywhere. Any direction you turn, you can see. So my Saint Bernard runs down the driveway, and I'm like, I can't have him in the road. So I chase him, and I'm telling you, I was no more than 10 to 15 yards behind him, not very far. He's right in front of me, really, because he can cover ground, but he's lazy. He doesn't like run that fast, but he is running away from me because he knows I'm going to put him on a leash, and they don't listen. So I'm chasing him, and I'm telling you, he's like right in front of me. The next thing I know, he's nowhere to be found. Like I blinked and he disappeared. So I'm like looking in every direction, like, where'd he go? There's nothing for him to hide behind. There are no crops. There's not a cornfield he can disappear into. There are no big trees. There's not even a building. Any direction I look, I would see him. And he's not there. So I'm like, what the heck happened? So the only thing I could think is there's like a hump in the ground. And I thought, is he on the other side of this hump laying down? Because he's tall, he's a big dog. He's tall. I would be able to see him if he's standing up, because it's not like it was a hill. It was just like a hump. So I get to the other side of this hump. He's not there. I'm like, dude, my dog disappeared into thin air. So I stop moving. I'm quiet. I'm listening. I don't hear his feet. I don't hear panting, nothing. I call his name, nothing. I'm like, I don't know what happened. I'm awake. What happened? So I didn't know what to do. So I'm like, I guess I'll just go back across the street, up my parents' driveway, get in my car and start driving around. But here's the thing, if he was like, he, in order to get back to my parents' house, he had to go by me because it was behind me. So I was like, I don't know. So I start to go up the driveway and I start praying. I was like, Lord, I just pray that somehow my dog is up at the house. I know that's impossible because I would see him go by me, but I just pray he's somehow at the house because I can't have him loose running away and then getting hit by a car. Or I also had caught him before barking at a horse several streets over. Like I can't have, like, I need him back, right? So I know I know he can't be at the house. I would have seen him go by me, but I prayed it anyway. I'm telling you, I get up the driveway, I round the corner to the back of the house, and there he is, drinking out of a bucket of water. And I was like, okay. I was like, Lord, make him come to me, because he likes to run for me because he knows I'll put him on a leash. So I come around the corner, I call his name, and he does this, and he trots right over to me. I sit down in a chair on the little deck. He came right up to me. I put his leash on him. I'm like, thank God. But I was like, I literally, you can call me crazy, but I'm telling you, I've got 20/20 vision, and that dog disappeared from right in front of me and then was behind me at the house. Impossible to get by. Impossible. So I was like, I literally think he got like teleported. I don't know how else to describe it. I didn't like blank for 5 minutes or however long it would take him to go back. So it's, again, now, why would that happen? I don't know, because I'm a Christian and I prayed and God cares about me and everything that matters to me, which my dog does. I've prayed over my both my dogs. I have a Basset Hound. He was throwing up some mucus type disgusting, I don't know what. And I laid hands on him and I prayed for him, and then he was fine. Like, God actually cares about you and what matters to you, you know? Anyway, so that happened, and that was like 5 years ago. And I could find the video I posted on Facebook right after it happened, and I could play it. So if you think I'm making it up, I promise you it happened. All right. So we read about Paul. There's a little bit more I'm going to read, not that much. Now, okay, I once again can't see. So what does this say here? People interested in supernatural phenomena, time anomalies, and teleportation, or dimensional theories sometimes point to these passages as evidence that, okay, do I really need to read that? No, because that's all in the Bible. And I understand there are people who don't want to take the Bible literally about anything, but that's how you get into bad doctrine, because the Bible should always be taken literally. And if you can't take it literally, look for the most literal meaning. So I'm not going to waste my time with that. Anyway, now, as I mentioned, I think you have to get into the occult if it's not God initiating catching someone away. Now, on the subject of alien abductions, okay? Now, I understand if it's the first time you've ever heard about it, it's very easy to dismiss it like, these people are nuts. They're okay. One of like three things is true. They're insane. They're actually out of their mind. They like acid or LSD, or they're liars for money or attention. That's what you would assume if you've never heard this, because it sounds nuts. However, I promise you, if you look into the topic and actually listen to people who say they've been abducted, look at their body language, compare their story to the stories of other people who say they've been abducted, people who they don't know each other from Adam. They have nothing to do with each other. They're from different parts of the country, even the world. And they all have similar experiences. And for example, oftentimes they're taken from their bedrooms, like at night. Sometimes they're not in their bedrooms, but oftentimes they are. They're taken, some people as kids, some people as adults, some people from the time they're kids into adulthood. They know when it's coming. There's like a buzzing or a frequency type of something or other. They can kind of hear it / feel it, and they know when it's coming if they've been taken before. They're always afraid. with the exception of someone like Marina Sarin, who, in my opinion, is, well, she's like a witch of some kind. So she's brainwashed into believing she's a star child type, like she's useful to these entities. She's demon possessed, in my opinion. So normal people, they don't think it's a good thing. They're terrified. When these things come to get them, usually they see these little, what they describe as the alien grays. They're short, maybe 3 to 4 feet tall, big black eyes, and they're sort of like robotic. And they do like mind speak or voice to skull, like telepathy, basically. It's not like they're hearing audible commands, but these things come get them. And then oftentimes they go through a closed window, or the window opens on its own, which is exactly what Acts chapter 12 talks about with the iron gates. The gates opened on their own. So it's clearly possible if there's like an angel involved. In this case, I don't believe the little gray aliens are angels. I think they're demonic beings in little in suits that allow them to maneuver allow them to go get people physically. I think because demons are always looking to get into a person, if not a person, an animal. Like we read when Jesus cast the legion out of the Gerasene demoniac, and they're like, "Don't send us into the abyss, send us into the pigs." So he did, and then the pigs go drown in the water. So demons, I think, usually have to kind of be like in something if they're going to be like taking people. Although they can manifest physically and scratch people and things like that. But anyway, so these little things come get them, and then they go through a closed window, or the window opens on its own. They end up on a ship, and almost everybody ends up on a metal table where sperm is taken from men, ovum is taken from women. Experiments are done to them against their will. Some people even got implanted by little chips. They call them alien implants. Dr. Roger Leir took out 16 or 17 of them before he died in 2014. They don't know what they are. They can't even, the material, the alloy of the chip is not even like anything we have on Earth. It's like close to something, but they don't know what it is. And then it's coated in something. They also don't know what that is. And they've tested it in labs in Canada and here in the US, I think. So these people tell these stories, and they don't have anything to do with each other. Oftentimes they have actual physical marks on their bodies, sometimes inside their bodies, that corroborate their story. Something happened to you, and we don't know what. So it sounds insane until you sit down and actually listen to people. All right, I'm going to give this a chance. I'm going to read their body language. I'm going to see if this person's nuts or making it up. And I'm sure some people have made it up, but that just because you have someone trying to make money or get attention doesn't mean that people haven't actually experienced something. And they're gone in real time. They're gone in real time. And that's what I'm going to get into and read to you about this first person here. Is the Travis Walton incident. So it's probably the most famous missing time, became a missing person case. So Watson disappeared for 5 days in Arizona in 1975. His logging crew reported seeing a glowing craft and said that he was struck by a beam of light. Police initially suspected the crew murdered him because he was physically gone, and a large search was launched. Walton later reappeared disoriented and claimed he had been aboard a craft. What made the case famous was that multiple witnesses reported the initial event, and then skeptics later argued it was a hoax or influenced by UFO media. So you're telling me, is it more believable that somebody went to that an elaborate, let's just make this up, let's make this guy missing for 5 days, let's involve the police, let's have him come back disoriented, let's make up a story about a glowing craft? If you think that's more believable than what actually happened when tons of other people have experienced essentially the same thing, that's up to you to decide. I don't personally believe that. There's too much to dismiss the whole thing. There's no way every UFO sighting can be accounted for by a hoax. And some have. Some of them you've had experts actually, and I think I'm glad they do. They should. They've gone through footage and they've debunked some things. I think the whole the UFO that supposedly descended over the Dome of the Rock in Israel. This was like forever ago. And then all of a sudden it shot up into the sky. I'm pretty sure that's been debunked as someone just manipulated footage. Like, that's not real. But there are tons that are real. And there are people who are actually missing in real time. And oftentimes they have scars or internal injuries consistent with what they say happened. So Travis Watson, I'm sorry, was one of the first ones to kind of make people, like, again, that's why am I talking about this? Because of the real time situation. Clearly, they're not here. So when it comes to this whole subject of, whether you want to call it, I wouldn't call that time travel, because I don't think they're going back or forward in time, but it does mean that they're physically taken to another place, which I think is exactly what we saw in the Bible. I don't think Jesus had a vision of Satan taking him up to the Temple Mount or whatever. I think they were physically there. And there was a means of travel that they didn't go by horseback. I don't think they walked together. I don't think they got into a carriage or something. I think there was like a literal picking up, catching away, harpazo, and then putting in another place, like with Philip. So the point is, with these abductions, these aren't good. So this is not the spirit picking people up with these little gray, look like alien beings, and then putting them on a ship. You want to tell me that's one of the easiest ways to debunk the whole, like Dr. Stephen Greer, we think these are benevolent space brothers. Okay, Greer, why would they be taking people against their will? Why do they rape people? And then, I mean, the missing pregnancies, that's a real thing. Brett Baer, who's like not at all a sensational person. He's boring as all get out. He's serious. And he did a segment on the news about missing pregnancies. People who said, I was taken by what I can only describe as aliens. I was violated, and then I found myself to be pregnant. And then 3 months later, I was taken again, and the fetus is now gone. I had the pregnancy confirmed by my doctor. Then after I was taken and something was different, I go back to the doctor and they can't tell I was ever pregnant. And they're like, are you sure that you were? And they're like, yes, you literally confirmed it. So something's happening. There's a physicality to it. That's why when, and I'm glad a lot of people, now that this alien conversation's been like gone mainstream, I'm glad that a lot of Christians are saying this is demonic, because it is, and it is a deception. But at the same time, it's not quite that simple, because there is a physicality to it. People really are taken. They really are gone in real time. The missing pregnancies are real. And here's the thing, if it sounds insane, let the Bible explain what's happening. If you read Genesis 6, that's exactly what happened in Genesis 6. I don't know that there were spacecrafts involved, but the point is, you had fallen angels who saw the daughters of men, the human women, and they desired them. So they took any they wanted as wives, and then they gave birth to the Nephilim, which were giants, which were, for lack of a better word, hybrids. They were not human. They required a human to come about, but they were not human, which is why I think that's why God flooded the earth right after that happened. And then every time when they reappeared, because the Bible says they did, then he tasked Israel. He said, go possess the land I've given to you. The giants that are in your way, kill all of them. There was not an ounce of mercy. So either God likes genocide, or you're dealing with something that's not human, which is why there's no mercy when it comes to demons or Satan or fallen angels, because they're not human. There's mercy for people. God has incredible grace and patience for humans. He'll put up with, I actually don't know how he hasn't killed us yet. His grace and mercy is beyond my understanding, because if I were in his position, I would have been done with humanity a long time ago. I wouldn't have even, whatever. So hybrid, it's a breeding program happened in Genesis 6. So then we fast forward to present day, and there's still a breeding program. There's human beings, and they're being taken, and something's being done against their will, and there's a breeding program happening. And so I know Chuck Missler said it like this. He said, Satan's outnumbered 2-1. He's breeding an army. Why? Because when Satan fell from heaven, he took 1/3 of the angels with him, and 2/3 stayed in heaven, outnumbered 2-1. And so that's what Missler was saying, is he's breeding an army, because eventually it's going to go down where Satan's going to get what's coming to him, but it's not, everything's not going to be decided without him putting up a fight. And he's obviously, to get back at God, the next best thing, since he can't get to God, he goes after people who are the apple of God's eye. We are most important to him. So this corruption, Satan has then targeted people, and there you go with the whole Genesis 6 thing. It comes on the heels of Genesis 3:15, when God looked at Satan and cursed him and said, the seed of the woman is going to crush your head. So if you're Satan and you're like, oh, so the seed of the woman, meaning her offspring, I'll just go corrupt the bloodline then. And boom, there you have Genesis 6. And God's like, no, think twice. And he floods, knocks, wipes them all out with the flood. But of course, they come back after that. But that's when Israel was told to go kill them. So fast forward to today, it's no different. It's literally the same breeding program. They're just not giants. I think, in fact, it's probably like gotten fine-tuned where they can pass as people in a lot of situations, until probably you get a look at their eyes and you're like, you're something evil. You're not a person. But I wouldn't be surprised you have people up in high levels of the government, or, who knows, tied in with the Vatican, things like that may not actually be people, and they may look like it, but, and I'm not really, I know a lot of people, like the conspiracy theories are out there about like Mark Zuckerberg. Like, does he look human? No, not really. But I also think he's just like a nerd and demon possessed, probably. So I don't know that he's like not a person. I know there are theories out there. Again, I wouldn't be surprised for some people, but again, some of them are probably just demon possessed. So if something in their eyes doesn't look right, it's because they got some passengers on board. Anyway, what did we read? Travis Watson. What did I just read? Okay, there are some more cases. Barney and Betty Hill incident. So one of the earliest and most influential abduction reports is from Barney and Betty Hill. The Hills realized they had unexplained missing time during a drive-through New Hampshire. So they arrived home hours later than they were expected to, and they had fragmented memories and strange details like damaged clothing and unexplained marks on the car. So I'm telling you, there's a physicality to it. So under hypnosis, both described an alleged abduction narrative. Unlike Walton, they were not missing persons to police for days, but they claimed a real world time gap occurred. I'm telling you, like L.A. Marzulli, when he interviews people who say they were taken, that's one of the common things, is that they have missing time. Tons of people missing time because they are physically taken. There are more. The Pascagoula, I don't know how to say that, this incident. So Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claimed they were taken while fishing in Mississippi. They reported paralysis. That's another common one. Being taken aboard a craft, examined, and then returned. All of that tracks. Police secretly recorded them afterward because they thought the men might be inventing the story, but the recording captured them sounding terrified and discussing the experience privately. That recording is one reason the case became famous. The men were not gone for days, but they claimed they experienced a real interruption in time and physical relocation. Yes. So it's not like a fringe thing one person made up. Like, lots of people report the same thing. And then Antonio, whatever his name is. So his case, okay, not Italian, Brazilian. A Brazilian farmer claimed that he was taken from a field while working at night. He later returned physically distressed and reportedly had burns, nausea, and other symptoms afterward. That's common as well. This case became one of the earliest modern abduction narratives. And then the Meng, whatever, not going to try that last name, incident. A Chinese lumber worker claimed he was taken aboard a craft and later returned. The story became extremely famous in China and was investigated by local UFO organizations. So again, it's people from different parts of the world, and they all have similar symptoms afterwards, similar stories. and similar experiences of missing times, even physical marks on their bodies and stuff. So that's the whole thing with Project Pegasus. Actually, you know what? I'll play you two. One video is like a super short recap. If you didn't hear the first part where I read about Project Pegasus, this is just a very short, it's like a YouTube short to give you a recap. Again, I'm not saying I believe all of it. I think it probably was a real program. I just don't necessarily believe they successfully did. So I'll play this, and then I have one more video that I'm going to play, and it's definitely real.
The CIA's top secret time travel program that used stolen Nikola Tesla tech to send soldiers back in time. One of the soldiers was a young man named Andrew Basiago, who in 1968 was sent back to 1863 to observe Abraham Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. But the tech was not created by the CIA. It was stolen from Nikola Tesla's files. And early tests of the program on adults proved to be extremely difficult. They were not able to withstand the process, and many of them did not make it back safely. So the scientists concluded that an adult mind was too rigid to handle the temporal displacement, and that a more flexible mind was needed. But a child's mind, that could work. And so they turned to the past for their first chrononaut, a soldier from the future sent back in time to observe history. And as proof, they present this historical photograph from Gettysburg. They claim that this person is Andrew Basiago. Look at his oversized shoes and his modern haircut. He's a time traveler from the future. Wait, it gets crazier. Project Pegasus also had a Mars jump room, and one of the people who went through it was a future president of the United States.
Obama.
Is this all a fictional story? Or is there a hidden truth that history has not yet revealed?
Okay, so I don't really buy the photograph from Gettysburg. I don't really buy that Barack Obama was a chrononaut. I don't really buy that they were jumping to Mars. I will say this about Mars. I do think something has been there. And the reason why and this sort of ties back to the gap theory, which I talked about several weeks back. And that's, I know lots of theologians don't believe this. So, and this is not a salvation issue. So if you believe it, fine. If you don't, fine. No one should fight with or attack other people depending on where they land. I'm not 100% sold on it, but I am open to it. The gap theory is based off of a potential gap between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. That the language in Hebrew could mean that God actually recreated the earth, which would mean there was an initial creation, which then got destroyed because it could be Satan falling from heaven when he was kicked out, or whatever. So there's a lot more to it than that. But the point is, there are some verses in the Bible that talk about, sounds like a reference to Satan before he was fallen. And he, of course, was a beautiful cherub. He was an archangel named Lucifer. And it talks about you were running like commerce and all this stuff. So the theory is, and here's the thing, archaeology, there are certain like structures on Earth that if the dating is correct, I know carbon dating is not always correct, but if the dating is correct, they seem to predate Adam. Adam was about 6,000 years ago. There's stuff that they think is much older than that. So that begs the question, if it's on Earth and it's older than the first man, who built it? So that's where the gap theory could potentially explain that. If there was building construction that happened on this Earth, who made it? And it wouldn't have been people if Adam was in fact the first man, which I believe he was, because the Bible says that like word for word. So then who built this? I would guess there would have been angels. If God, this is a theory, okay? I'm not saying it's for sure, but if God creates the earth and he tasks angels with constructing something here on earth. Satan is the head of that. And then Satan, of course, gets puffed up with pride, and then God kicks him out of heaven, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Where did he, if there's a gap there, before God recreates the earth and puts people on it and gives dominion to people, and Satan's been kicked out of his presence, and where is he? Is he on a very long leash tied to earth? Doesn't seem to be. So if you got kicked out of heaven and you're the devil, where did you go and what did you do? So if there's something on Mars, like people think there are pyramid structures there, or like the faces, you could Google it and see what I'm talking about if you don't know. Who went there and built something? I don't believe it's aliens. I don't believe it's mankind somehow got there. I think if there's something there, it probably was whatever was also here on earth, structures built by angels, or could have been built by fallen angels, depending on the timeline there. So that's a theory. I don't know that for sure. If that can be debunked, fine. I'm not like in theological concrete over it. But I wouldn't be surprised if space is like part of the second heaven, then that would make sense that Satan or fallen angels would be messing around with space, the moon, Mars, whatever else, right? But I would bet that when it's all said and done, about when disclosure comes and they feed us this alien narrative, they probably will use Mars and whatever structures may be there to say, see, aliens made all of this. I think Antarctica, they'll show us what's there, the structures there, whatever else is there. See, they built this. They may confirm Atlantis was actually real. This was a city, highly advanced ancient culture, because it was actually the aliens who helped people build it, or they were here, the pyramids, the megalithic, the walls and things in like Sacsayhuaman, Peru, probably the Peruvian mummies that we talked about in part 1. Give us finally we'll do proper DNA testing, and then we'll prove they're aliens. And see, humanity has always been visited by aliens, because they actually seeded us, so there is no God of the Bible. Everything came here from the aliens. And they'll take credit for all that. And then probably getting back to the Vatican, whether or not this chronovisor thing is real, I think the Vatican probably does have artifacts and secrets, which will come out and further support. They've already talked about they would baptize aliens. Pope Francis said that. I think the current Pope said something similar. So they're going to be, in my opinion, part of propelling the rest of the world toward the Antichrist system, which I think will be tied in with this whole alien thing. It's just interesting that disclosures finally, we're getting little pieces of it from even in the White House, but I think it's a lot more than just they're going to confirm aliens are from outer space somewhere. There'll be a lot more to it. There's a whole word for it. I don't remember what it is, but obviously, like, evolution is retarded. Like, anyone, again, maybe people were dumb in the 1800s where you could like make a case for it, but like now we know it's retarded. But there's a word for, I don't remember what the word is, but it's a word for where you'll try to keep evolution true, but it'll be evolution from aliens. I watched an AI generated video on it. I don't know who made it, but they were depicting early man, basically like Neanderthal looking cave people. And then it was showing an alien park, like land on Earth on a ship, and he got out and he helped the early man learn how to hunt and make fire or start fire and all that stuff. So there's like a word where they'll push evolution, but with an alien narrative that we evolved from something the aliens made, which I think is probably where it's all headed. That way you can throw out the God of the Bible, you can throw out the creation story, blah, 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 blah. But the interesting thing, and you have to throw out the Bible, because the Bible explains everything that's happening. The Bible explains all the megalithic structures, Yes, there were giants here. Genesis 6 and all throughout the Old Testament, like 30 some different tribes of or races of giants. And so it can all be the fallen angels. We know about the abduction, like the hybrid breeding program. Genesis 6 tells us, Jesus said it'll be as it was in the days of Noah. In the last days, Daniel 2:43, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they won't cleave to them. We're like told, the Bible like told us ahead of time what's coming. So you have to attack the Bible if you want to establish your alien narrative. And I know I'm getting off subject when it comes to Project Pegasus, but that's because I got into the abductions to show you there is the possibility of there's a physicality to literally being taken from one place to somewhere else and not having to go through the proper like abide by the laws of physics, because they're able again to go through walls or closed windows or watch windows open on their own, and that can't like that's not possible unless there's something supernatural happening. So back to Pegasus, what we started with, if you are telling me you're trying to time travel or teleport, I don't think you can do that with math equations. You have to get into the occult. So it's bad news any way you look at it. So if anyone has successfully done it, I guarantee they're doing some kind of witchcraft like they are at CERN in Switzerland. Because you can't just science, like I said, science goes to a certain point and then it becomes the occult, and it's playing God, and it's just another version of the Tower of Babel, which obviously God wasn't cool with because he went and confused the language. We're not doing this, and confused the language. So I don't think I you know, it's just I don't really buy the Mars part. I don't really buy the picture in Gettysburg from Basiago, but I don't doubt it was a real program where they at least tried. And Nikola Tesla, you know, I understand he came up with a lot of things that like were good. In fact, we'd probably have like free energy if they used some of the stuff that he worked on. But he also was, you know, I don't think he was a Christian. Like he was some type of Orthodox as he grew up, but I don't know. Some of that stuff is just like you gotta wonder about the source of some of these people that are getting so deep into science, what's actually propelling them. And again, science, there's nothing wrong with science. God made it. And the more, in fact, the more you press into science, the more it points to there is a God, there is a creator and a designer. Lee Strobel did a great job in his book, The Case for a Creator, where he was an atheist. He was like an investigative journalist or something in Chicago, and his wife got born again, and he thought his wife would turn into like this miserable religious like hater, and instead she was like nicer than she'd ever been, and she like loved him more, and she was so gracious and patient. And he's like, what happened to her? And she kept talking about this Jesus like he was a real person, and he's like, I gotta know what happened to my wife. And so as an atheist, he started to study, and he started to interview experts and really look into, is there a God, and is the God of the Bible, like, is this true? And so that's a really good book for anyone who struggles with those questions. But he realized that the more you study science, the more it points to intelligent design. So there's nothing wrong with science is my point. But if you have to achieve something scientifically that you can only achieve using occult techniques like remote viewing or astral projection or something, that's bad news. So you need to, you know, whatever you do, don't get into witchcraft, because you'll end up demon possessed and eventually in hell. So you don't want to do that. I told you there was one more video I was going to play, and I am. This is from Polinichi. He is Nigerian, so you may have a little bit of trouble with his accent. If you do, I'll tell you what he said after the video plays. This actually happened in Nigeria. Someone from his church. So, oh no, I'm going to have to move it forward. Hold on. He's not from Nigeria. That's my pastor. I got to jump ahead. This is interesting though. You got to hear it. No, I'm wrong. There he is.
Please, I'm so sorry. We'll return back the phone. You see, I want to be your friend. Now, when such testimony was shared, everywhere erupted. And then people, okay, so this thing is fightable. So this thing is conquerable.
Boss, I like how he talks. This thing's fightable. Whatever's going on in Toronto, it's fightable. You can't fight. You can't fight. It's too late. There's a break his jaw. The principality, I'm not calling for violence if you're watching on YouTube. Continue.
Okay, so this thing is fightable. So this thing is conquerable. Within the same 2 weeks, we had another one. Young girl from, I think Benin or so, or somewhere, was going to Lagos. Around or side, they were kidnapped by kidnappers. Put in a lorry, taken into the bush. In the thickness of the jungle, she sat down and closed her eyes and was singing one of the songs. You are always there to help. You are always there to help me. Even when no one was there. She bent her head. Finished singing, opened her eyes. And she was sitting on the highway by the military checkpoint. She had disappeared from there. Translocated, transported from the road, sitting by military checkpoint on Benin or expressway.
Okay, so if you couldn't catch it through his accent, he said a girl from their church, a young girl, she got kidnapped by they have, Nigeria, they've been killing Christians for a while, but there's something headsmen is what they're called. So they kidnapped her, they took her out into the bush. So we're talking like Machete, Africa. And so she puts down her head, like he said, she put down her head and she's singing one of their songs from their church. And the next thing she knows, she lifts her head and she's by the road, right by the military checkpoint. She was out in the bush where the kidnappers took her. And next thing you know, she's by a military checkpoint. So like he said, transported, translocated. And that obviously, that wasn't an alien. That wasn't something demonic. That was the Spirit of God who came to help her. So it's not impossible. Teleportation is not impossible. It just sounds like it is. If you think I'm going to build like a time machine, I don't buy that. But to think that that's not possible, it is. The Bible has shown us it is. Philip teleported, ends up with, he's here with the eunuch. He ends up there in Azotus. It's a 20-mile different, he's in another location. So these things can happen in the spirit. The problem is when people try to make it happen on their own. And if you're gonna make it happen, I think you have to tap into a spiritual power. And usually if you're gonna initiate it on your end, it means you've gotten into the occult. And that's very bad news. So that's it. That's Project Pegasus. There's way more to it. If you wanted to go look it up, other people have had other things to say. Some people don't believe any of it. Again, I don't believe all of it. But since Montauk was real and Stargate was real, and they have admitted to doing remote viewing, I would venture to say the program probably existed. I just draw the line personally when it comes to them jumping to Mars or jumping back into the 1800s and listening to Abraham Lincoln. Personally, I don't believe that. You can make up. I'm not here to tell anybody what to think. I'll present what I believe are the facts. I'll tell you where I'm coming from. You make up your own mind. I can promise you this. I can promise you this. If you will read the Bible, and here's the thing, if you don't know, like if it's true or not, here's what I would challenge you to do. Actually, I'll pop up a picture in a second, and I explained it in part 1, but I'll do it again. If you don't know if it's real, you have nothing to lose by doing this. Just say this out into the ether. God of the Bible, if you're real, and if this book is true, I want you to show me. And then start reading your Bible, or go get one. Don't get a Passion Bible or a Message Bible. Get like New Living Translation, NLT, or you could do New King James or ESV. That's what I read. I wouldn't really tell people to go get King James because it's hard to understand. No one speaks 17th century English anymore. But start reading it. That book is alive and it literally will change your life. I am living proof, and it continues to change me for the better. I've read through the whole thing more times than I've lost count, and I still get things out of it that I didn't know like it was there, because it's alive. It's the word of God. He's a real God, and he cares very much about every single person. Everything about you is so important to God. Everything. That's why when I talked about my dog, God cared. I didn't want my dog running into the road and getting hit. I didn't want him disappearing. God cares about what matters to you. He's actually a loving, good God. He's actually nice, you know. Now, he's holy and he's just, but he's a good God. And the Bible is your way to him, because you'll encounter a person who is the word of God. His name is Jesus, and there really is only one way to heaven, and it's through a person, and his name is Jesus, and he's the nicest, most loving, awesome person you could ever know. And you have nothing but good things waiting for you if you will get into that book. I can promise you that. It will change you for the better. Now, I mentioned a picture I was going to pop up, and I'm going to go get it. I did this in part 1, but I'm going to show it again because I want to explain what it is, because it's awesome. And I actually didn't know. There it is. Okay, I'll tell you what this is. So it says, "Dear LA, this land is yours, Santa Monica Mountains." So let me explain this. I mentioned LA Marzulli when I was talking about alien abductions. And he's interviewed a bunch of people. Karen Wilkinson is one. Al Matthews is another. Emil Jurek, someone named Angela. Those are just a few. And if you go to his website, he has the films he's made. You can stream them, or if you're a little bit old school, you want to buy the DVDs, you can. He's also written a bunch of books, but he will tell you what's going on with this UFO alien narrative from a biblical perspective. Now, this picture. So his name is LA. That's his first name. They're obviously, those are initials, but he goes by LA. So when he was a young man, he was renting a house in the Santa Monica Mountains, and he was like 3 months behind on his rent. He wasn't married yet. And so he went to the landlord, the people who owned it, and he said, "Can I like do landscaping for you to catch up on the rent that I'm behind on?" And so the guy said, "Yeah, you can do that." So he's landscaping this property that he's renting. And as he's like putting rocks down to make like little rock flower beds or whatever, the Spirit of God spoke to him and said, "This is your land. You're doing this for yourself. This is your land." And he's like, "What?" And so come to find out, in a little bit of time, the people who owned the property said, "We're going to just let you have it. Like, you don't need to rent it from us anymore." They like gave it to him. So when the Lord said, "This land is yours, you're doing this for yourself," it literally, like, that became his land. So then fast forward, he's married at this point. It's 2018. And he and his wife are in Oklahoma, and there was a fire in 2018, and they lost pretty much everything on this same property in the Santa Monica Mountains. It burned almost everything, but one of their daughters was there. She's able to get like their dogs out and a couple other things, but it like burned everything down, right? So they had to go into like some extended stay America type place, and they had to like find a place to rent. And he goes up to the property, and he's looking around. You know, there's all this damage from the fire, and he picked up a rock that was charred on the top, and then he flipped it over, and it looked normal on the other side. And the Lord spoke to him and said, "This is your land. Like, rebuild. This is your land I gave to you. Rebuild." And so he went and told his wife that, and his wife was like, "Yeah, right. Like, I don't buy it. There's no way. We don't have the money because we lost everything. There's no way we're rebuilding on that land. We're going to have to, I don't know what we're going to do, but there's no freaking way." Right? So she wasn't on board. And then like a week or two later, very soon after this happened, they're in LAX in the airport, and his wife goes, "Oh my gosh, look. And he's like, "What?" She's like, look at that sign." And this is what they saw on a sign in LAX. This thing: "Dear LA, this land is yours, Santa Monica Mountains." So his wife, when she saw that, she's like, "Oh my gosh, LA, you just told me that. That's what the Lord said to you, and I didn't buy it. But like, now that I see this in the LAX airport, now I'm on board. Okay, we will rebuild on our land." So that was in 2018, and they're still there on that property in the Santa Monica Mountains. That's where he does all his broadcasting from. They do a new show like every day. He just wrote a novel. He's been making films for a long time. I would consider him the authority on the subject when it comes to aliens, when it comes to the abductions, when it comes to UFOs, all of that, because he'll give it to you from a biblical perspective. And one of the things I love about him is, I told you in part 1, he was, in fact, at one point he may have been an atheist, but he was in the occult. He was with an ashram, or in the ashram with a guru for 3 years. And he did the whole astral projection and traveling outside of his body. And then he got into like LSD and drugs. He was at Woodstock. So he's been on the other side of the aisle. He's been there. He knows what that side is like. And he's like channeled, had spirit guides and things like that. So he knows the lies that are on that side. And now he's on the right side when he got born again, and he knows the things he heard and learned on the other side. So he's one of the, I'd say, is the best person to listen to on the subject, just because of his experience. Plus he's 75 now. He's been doing this for over 30 years. He's interviewed the abductees. He's been to, Peru. He's handled the elongated skulls there that are weird. He's been to megalithic sites. He's been all over the place. So I would go to his website, lamarzulli.com, I think it is, or lamarzulli.net. I think it's .com now. You can stream the videos from there. If you want to know what's going on this subject from a biblical perspective, because you'll get the truth. I promise you that. It's the truth when it's coming from the Bible. He would be the first person I would go listen to. Okay. That's it for part 2. I am going to get into the Bible. It may seem like I just did, but I really didn't. In part 3, I'm going to get into the Bible. I'm not going to start it until 7 o'clock. So real quick, let me pop these up, and we're going to end part 2. These are the ways to find me if you want to follow or subscribe or whatever. Those are all the platforms where I exist. I will eventually get TikTok going. I just have been putting it off because I'm not 12 and I don't want to get on TikTok, but I think I should. So eventually I will do that. But there, Instagram, Substack, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X, and Facebook. There's my email address if you want to talk about anything. If you're rude, I probably won't respond. I will pray for you, though. Every time someone's been rude, I've prayed for them. So something good comes out of it. And then if you want to support Amber Alert Podcast, those are the ways that you can. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. I am not affiliated with anybody. This is me in my basement talking about things which I personally think are important as the days grow darker, as disclosure is imminent, as deception is flying right and left, as we are so close to the end. That's another thing. If you doubt the Bible, I like read, like you can use ChatGPT or Grok and it'll spit out a list in like seconds of Bible prophecies concerning the end times that have already happened or are like happening now. And it will open your eyes. The Bible doesn't miss even little, I wouldn't call it little, but things like it talks about the Euphrates River will be dried up to make way for the kings of the East. It's literally drying up. You can look it up. And there are just a ton of other things. So this thing is winding down. And, they've made a bunch of movies about the end of the world, but like it's coming very soon. So now is not the time to toss the dice with your eternity. If you don't know that you'll go to heaven when you die, I wouldn't gamble on it anymore. It'll be the best thing that's ever happened to you. You'll have peace, hope, joy like you've never known before. But actually in part 3, when I started at 7 o'clock, I'm going to talk about the satisfaction of that you only get through Bible Christianity, through the person of Jesus. There's only one way. So I will talk about that in part 3. And since I'm basically getting into it, I am going to end this. I will start a new live video at 7 o'clock. Okay. That's 17 minutes from now. Okay. So I will see you there in part 3. God bless you and goodbye.